Yeah, it's inspiring.
Awesome. Well, we're live now, so give some people a chance to jump on and join us.
Where are you guys located?
I am in San Luis Obispo, California.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in Titusville, Florida, by the space station or center over here.
Ah, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm coming in from Charlotte, North Carolina is where I am right now.
Nice.
Nice.
Capital
All over
racing.
the place.
A lot of race car headquarters there, right?
Yeah, that's why I came out here. So I actually went to school at UC San Diego. And then once I started racing cars, everybody had different opinions on how to get going in racing. But the one thing that everybody agreed on was that I had to move to North Carolina. So
Yeah.
I came here in 2002 and I've been here ever since.
Very cool. Very cool.
It worked out well.
Yeah.
It did.
Cool. Well, let's just launch into it. Let me welcome everyone to Headwaters Science Institute's Earth Day chat with Leilani Münter. She is, as everyone knows, I'm sure, the star of the documentary Racing Extinction. I'm Dan Edel, the communications director here at Headwaters, and I'm joined by Jen Cotton, our program director. And we're both extremely excited to have Leilani here with us, and we hope everyone enjoyed the screening of the film. I think it's definitely an especially important reminder on Earth Day of the challenges we face to keep our planet healthy for generations to come. So we'd also like to remind our viewers that we are just a couple weeks away from another very important day in Headwaters' mission to bring hands-on science education to students from all walks of life, especially those in disadvantaged communities. So May 5th is Big Day of Giving, and you can head over to our fundraising link, our fundraising page at the link I just posted below to join our mission of bringing research-based science to as many students as possible in the Sacramento area and across the country. So we hope you'll take some time to check out our page there after our chat with Leilani. And so yeah, let me just introduce Leilani. Obviously, for those who've seen the film, she really needs no introduction, but real quick, and for those who don't know, she's a filmmaker, environmental activist, plant-based activist, race car driver, and board member at the Oceanic Preservation Society. So with that, let me just start by asking you, Leilani, just to talk a little bit more about yourself and background and how you got involved with Racing Extinction. And then we'll open up to any questions we may have from our viewers.
Sure. Okay. Well, first of all, happy Earth Day, everyone. And thanks for having me here. I had sort of an interesting way of getting to my current career. My degree is actually in biology, specializing in ecology, behavior, and evolution at the University of California in San Diego. And throughout my time at UCSD, I formed a bucket list of things that I wanted to do. And one of those things was driving a race car. And once I got in the race car, I got hooked. So after I graduated from UC San Diego, I moved to North Carolina, which is where I am now, and pursued my career racing cars. I raced cars from 2001 all the way up until 2019 when I retired. I ran all different kinds of cars promoting environmental efforts that I feel passionately about. So solar power and electric cars. I've been driving an electric car since 2013, and I drove my electric car to all my races. My team was the first team in history to ever power our pit box using solar power. So we had a battery pack and a solar array that we could bring with us to the track, so we didn't have to use any diesel fuel. One of the big eye-opening moments for me was actually when An Inconvenient Truth came out back in 2006. And that was when I really started to feel that I wanted to use my voice as a driver to talk about environmental issues. So that was the year that I made the commitment to adopt and protect an acre of rainforest every time I sat in my car. Because even though my personal car was electric, there was nothing I could do about the fuel that was going into the actual race car. So when I retired, I had adopted over 1,500 acres of rainforest through the Rainforest Trust. And then around the time of 2010, a beautiful film came out called The Cove. The Cove won the Academy Award in 2010, and it's actually still the most winning documentary of all time. It was made by the Oceanic Preservation Society. I saw that film and was very moved by it, and I became a volunteer for Rick O'Barry, who's the main activist that's featured in The Cove. And I became a volunteer and an ambassador for his organization, the Dolphin Project. And then through that connection, I started holding screenings of The Cove. And then I met Luis Sahoyas, who's the director of the film, and he's also the executive director of the Oceanic Preservation Society. We figured out that we really needed people to see what was going on with the dolphins. The Cove is about the connection between the largest slaughter of dolphins in the world and the captive dolphin industry. And in the course of doing that, we decided to take a Cove-themed race car to Daytona to help fans that, were only an hour or so away from SeaWorld, to educate them about what happens to the dolphins and why the dolphin captivity industry is bad. And it was at that race that Louis told me, I've got a job for you in our next documentary. And that turned out to be Racing Extinction. And for those of you who watched it, you will have seen that I drove the electric Tesla mobile projection vehicle, where we used the car to bring imagery of endangered species into urban places. And since then, I joined the board of directors of OPS, or Oceanic Preservation Society, and I'm working on another documentary with them now that is about existential risk to humanity.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, thanks for that introduction. And Jen, I think you may have wanted to start off with asking a few questions of your own.
Yeah, she sort of answered one of them, but I did want to remind everybody that if you want your question to be featured, to go ahead and put it in the comments on Facebook, and we'll feature you on this Q&A. So go ahead and ask away. And then some questions that I had, it's just making the jump from biologist to activist. It seems like a big jump, not personally, but how can somebody else go out and try and make those changes?
There's so many ways you can get involved. One of the first things that I did early on, when I feel like it was releasing an inconvenient truth that took me from, I was maybe an activist amongst my friends and my family, but I wasn't so publicly active in fighting for these issues. And that film really brought the urgency of climate change and what we're facing, what future generations are facing, to the forefront, and made me feel like, okay, now it's time for me to try and combine, my voice as a race car driver and as someone in the sports world to talk about these important issues. And really, I just started volunteering for different organizations. I was a volunteer lobbyist with the National Wildlife Federation. So I went and sat with their climate change scientists, and we went to the Capitol Hill to meet with senators to talk to them about the actual Climate Security Act, which was the first time that the Senate was ever voting on a climate change bill. We didn't win, but I learned a lot about how to communicate with elected officials, and just sort of finding my voice and my footing to talk publicly about these issues that I really cared about. For me, the fact that I had a race car was very helpful, right? Because the race car is on TV. It's essentially a 200-mile-an-hour billboard that most drivers are using to promote products that they're selling, fast food, candy, soda, all different kinds of products go on race cars. My cars were quite unique in that I was typically promoting. I had 3 different documentaries on my films or on my car. So I had The Cove on my car. I had a film called Blackfish that was actually inspired by The Cove, that was about the orca captivity industry. And I also had a film called What the Health, which is promoting a plant-based diet. And for the last 3 years of my career, I actually ran a vegan themed race car, and we put up a tent and we gave away free vegan food to the race fans. We had vegan cheeseburgers, and we gave over 30,000 vegan cheeseburgers away to race fans in 2018. And I know that I converted quite a few race fans to go vegan. That's, as you know from the film, is one of the great ways that you can cut your carbon footprint. 3 times a day, we all sit down to eat a meal. And by leaving meat and dairy off your plate, you're actually really reducing your carbon footprint. So my husband and I have been vegan for 10 years, and it was pretty thrilling to be able to use my race cars, not just to talk about vegan food and have them talk about it on Fox Sports during the races, but to also get to see those race fans take their first bite of a delicious vegan cheeseburger and realize, that by me asking them to eat more plants, I wasn't saying they had to eat salads for the rest of their life. They could still have a delicious hamburger. It was just a hamburger that was made out of plants. So for me, the race car really became a vehicle for me to be an activist. It's what gave me a voice that could reach beyond. I go to environmental film festivals, and I went to clean energy events, and I went to vegan festivals. But typically at those events, I'm sort of talking to the choir, right? I'm gathering with a bunch of people that probably already agree with me, or they wouldn't be at the conference or the environmental film festival. So the race car is really where I feel like I was probably the most effective activist, because it was allowing me to talk to a demographic of people that you probably wouldn't have found at these environmental events that I was going to. And I was bringing the electric car to the racetrack. I was bringing the solar power pit box to the racetrack so they could see it at work. And one of the fun things that I did when I got my electric car is I would let the race fans know through social media. It allowed me to tell them what supercharger I was going to be charging my electric car at on my way to the racetrack. So the race fans could come and show up at the chargers, talk to me about the electric car, see it in person, ask questions, and connect with me on a more personal way than you can at the racetrack, because it's always very hectic over the race weekends. So I have to thank, my racing career for allowing me to become sort of a very loud activist in a place where there weren't very many activists.
Awesome.
Very cool.
We do have a question from our Facebook. So what can students do to move towards careers where they can have an impact, and are there classes or choices that they can make?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've learned, especially working with Oceanic Preservation Society, you saw in the film that there were all different kinds of skill sets that were needed to make racing Extinction. And so you don't necessarily have to specialize in something that's specifically about saving animals. I obviously came from a biology background, so that was what I was studying. But communications, for example, filmmaking, being a filmmaker, being a photographer, being able to help people see what's going on and how they can fix it. It's all different people from all different types of life that can do that. You saw Travis Dreckle in the film, who, he does those beautiful light installations. That was something that you wouldn't think had anything to do with the environment. And yet, because of his skill set, we were able to bring these messages about endangered species onto gigantic buildings like the United Nations building in New York and the Empire State Building. And then you wouldn't have seen this in the film because this actually happened after the film came out, but we actually projected at the Vatican when after the Pope announced his encyclical that was about fighting for the environment, and we projected all these beautiful endangered species onto the Vatican. So you can actually watch that online as well. I think it's called Our Common World. It's just beautiful. So I don't think you need to specifically study things that are about animals, but of course it's helpful if we have people, that are veterinarians, people that understand what's happening to these animals firsthand. I became very close with the man that was taking care of the last Rab's fringillum tree frog. You remember the scene in the movie where we go to something that was called the frog pod, where there was the last of his species. And I ended up, after racing Extinction, driving to Atlanta to meet with him. And I wrote an article. I got to meet that frog, which sadly he has since passed away. And if you want to read the article, it's on the Huffington Post, and it's called The Loneliest Frog in the World. And the interesting thing about meeting his caretakers, he didn't consider himself an environmentalist or an activist at all. He was just a man who was fascinated by amphibians and frogs and wanted to learn everything he could about them. So he ended up becoming a specialist in this, and he now runs an organization called the Amphibian Foundation. But he, in his course of learning about amphibians, realized, these creatures are really the canaries in the coal mine. They have permeable skin. So if there's any sort of chemical or anything bad going on in the environment, it goes right into their skin. And so they can't really, fight against any sort of chemicals that are around them. It'll soak right into their bodies. And so he said, one of the things we noticed is it would be scary that we would see areas that looked to us as scientists like a very healthy ecosystem, but for some reason the amphibians and the frogs were dying off. So that was a clue to them that, there's something going on here that we don't understand. And a lot of amphibians and frogs are endangered right now. Almost all the species are. So through his studies, he became an activist, and he said, it's an all hands on deck situation right now. I didn't get into this because I wanted to be an activist or an environmentalist, but now I see how urgent it is, and that these creatures that I love so much are going to blink off the planet if I don't scream from the rooftops that we need to do something. So I love that it's sort of, it doesn't matter what it is your skill set is, you can always use it to try and highlight what's happening with our planet and with the animals. And, something as simple as sharing the film, like what Headwaters did, doing these Q&As, sharing the trailer with your friends, telling them to watch it, just talking about it and starting the conversation, I think is really powerful. So that is what I would recommend.
Awesome. Yeah. So it sounds like a lot of it has to just do with passion, find something that you're passionate about to make that difference in that realm, so it's something that you care about, tell others why you care about it. And that starts the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And lawyers, I was going to say, there are lawyers now that are suing governments and corporations over their effect on the environment and their inability or refusing to take any responsibility for what they're doing to the environment. So, even if you become a lawyer, you can become a lawyer for the earth, or you can become a lawyer for the animals. It's really, it is a all hands on deck situation. So no matter what you do, you can help.
Yeah. And I know a lot of universities are picking up policy programs as well. So that's another route that you can go into.
Yep. And I really enjoyed, I did a lot of lobbying. I did the Climate Security Act was the first one, but I've also done lobbying for electric cars here in North Carolina. Back in like 2012, they were trying to stop Tesla from being able to sell cars in our state. So I was, helping, trying to talk to them about everybody should have access to an electric car if they want one. There's still problems with that across throughout the United States. There's problems with that. I've lobbied for clean energy. That it's a tough one because you're usually meeting with people that don't agree with you. There's no point in you sitting down with a senator that's already supporting the bill. So it is harder because you are sitting down with somebody who disagrees with you. But those are the most important conversations, that we can have. If we're only going around talking to people who already agree with us, then who's going to change the minds of those who don't?
So we have a question that's a little long, so I'm going to put it up to read it and then I'll pop it back down. So we used to do a lot of activities like beach cleanups, cleaning, hiking trails back in my home country, but I haven't seen much here in the US. I would really like to continue making an impact. Where would be a good place to search for these local volunteering events?
I know that Surfrider Foundation does a lot of beach cleanups. I guess it depends on where you're located, but you should just look up the environmental nonprofits that are in your area, and I'm sure you'll find something. I know that if you are near the coast, that's who I see post quite a bit about it is Surfrider. And then I know if you're in Hawaii, I think it's called the Kukua Foundation. It's someone that Jack Johnson works with, or it might be his own foundation. They do a lot of beach cleanups. There are organizations that do this, so you just have to pull up your Google bar and look for the places that are in your area.
Or start your own too, start a movement in your area, put it out on social media and see if you can get more people to join you and start that movement going in your area.
Yeah, I mean, that's the great thing about social media is we all can have a voice, right? You don't have to have your own, be a journalist and have your own newsletter in a printed newspaper or magazine. All of us can access social media. I'm most active on Twitter, but we all can communicate with the whole world in a very easy way. And there's definitely good and bad things about it, but I think a lot of good can come from it.
Looks like we've got another question from Ambrose here, kind of along those lines. What advice do you have for high school students that don't think they as one person can make a difference?
Yeah, I definitely understand that. I think all activists and people that are worried about what's happened to our planet can suffer from feeling like I'm just one person and this is such a huge problem, and you can feel like you're not having an effect. But there was this really great study, and this is what I always think of when I get sort of down in the dumps over, maybe not feeling like I'm having as big of an effect as I would like to. And this was a study that was done in 2011 by a group of scientists that wanted to see if there was a tipping point for ideas. And what they found is actually that if just 10% of a population has an unwavering belief in an idea, it's actually inevitable that the rest of the majority of the society will adopt that idea. And one of the scientists that was working on it said he would watch the idea really struggle that first 1%, 2%, 3%. It was a very slow moving spread. But all the ideas, the second that they hit a 10% amount of the population, he said they spread like a wildfire. So I always try and keep that in mind because I think, 10% feels really attainable. I feel like we can get to 10% on a lot of these solutions. And it just feels like that's something we can accomplish. If we haven't already accomplished it already, I feel like with plant-based foods are taking off, electric cars are taking off, solar power is taking off, it's getting cheaper. I'm seeing more and more homes with solar on it. We put up solar on our home in 2014, and I think we were only the 14th house in our entire, the power company that powers like 300,000 homes in our area. We were only the 14th home to be connected to net metering with solar, but I'm starting to see more and more of them. We were the first people who ever had an electric car in our neighborhood, and now I see 3 electric cars just in this one block area. So it does spread. It takes some time, I have to say it's kind of fun being the early adopter because you're getting to be the person that's sort of telling your neighbors and telling your friends. I remember when I got my electric car, I'd come out of the grocery store and sometimes there'd be a group of people standing outside my electric car waiting for me to come out of the grocery store because they wanted to ask me questions about, how do I charge it? Have I ever run out of battery? How much does it cost to charge it? Where do you charge when you go on road trips? All these kinds of things that, you might have those questions in your head, but it's helpful if you can talk to somebody who's actually living it. So it's important that you're sort of setting an example by your own behavior. And, I have friends that when I met them, they were like big time meat eaters. And then just by watching me cook my vegan food and coming over and having dinner with me and my husband, they have also now gone vegan. So it's important to set your own example and realize that every time that you make a choice to be a responsible consumer, to do the right thing for the planet, people are watching you and you're planting little seeds. Even if they don't tell you, just the thought of seeing you driving an electric car is going to plant a seed that, maybe I'll make my next car electric too. Seeing the solar panels when you're driving through the neighborhood, it all helps.
Great. We have on the opposite side of the spectrum a teacher that works with in pre-K. So what are some things that she could possibly do with her students at a very young age?
I think educating kids, and I think kids actually come into this world wanting to be kind to animals. And then over time, it feels like we are programmed or taught that some animals are here to be eaten and some animals are here to have sweaters knit for them and to cuddle with us on the couch. I was very lucky I grew up in Minnesota and I was able to interact with farm animals. And so I met the animals that are considered food animals, right? Chickens and turkeys and pigs and cows. And when you interact with these farm animals, you start to realize that they're not different from our cats and dogs. They like to be snuggled. They form emotional attachments to people in the very same way that our pets do. So I would really suggest, if at all possible, taking the kids out on a field trip and maybe going to visit like a farm sanctuary or somewhere where they can visit with these other animals. And I think they'll see them in a new light. Then when you go through the grocery store and you go through the meat aisle, you're not seeing food, you're seeing an animal that really shouldn't be dead and sitting on the shelf there. And that is a lasting memory that I have as a child. Was meeting those animals and knowing that, why is it that we love our cats and dogs, but for some reason we look at these other animals as if they're expendable. And factory farms are responsible for so much environmental destruction, habitat destruction of the rainforest, extreme high use of water, pollution to our water systems. It's causing ocean acidification. It's causing loss of species and loss of biodiversity. So I really am a big believer in us moving towards eating more plants and less animals. Right now, most of the crops that are being grown to be fed to livestock to be killed for food. And it's much more efficient, and we can actually feed far more people if those crops, instead of being fed to a cow to become beef, is fed directly to people. So I think the more and more we can switch in that direction will be good. And the great thing is there's so many wonderful plant-based products coming out there. It's so easy to be vegan and to be plant-based now. And I think the same thing holds true for electric cars. 10 years ago, there were hardly any electric cars. Now they're all over the place. And you see that every single company on the planet is either making an electric car now or they have plans to launch electric cars in the future. So I have a feeling by the time those toddlers are driving, seeing a gas car will be very rare. If anything, maybe you'll just be seeing gas cars in museums and all the cars on the street will be electric. And I really look forward to that. The streets will be much quieter and more peaceful.
Great. There's a couple activities too, like telling them how to cut back on like doing a litterless lunch, like what would that mean? Like, what would that look like? Not having all these different individually packaged things with all the plastic. There's a couple of little things you can do with the kids as well, on top of showing them how important all the organisms are, that I think would make an impact on them, and they go back and talk about it to their families as well. So that's an awesome point, Leilani. All right, Ambrose is on fire. So what are the top 3 things that you think students can do to make a difference, since they probably don't have the capacity to buy solar or electric cars?
Well, my first thing would be to share with their family and friends, not just Racing Extinction, but other films that are talking about our environmental crisis and talking about these beautiful endangered species that we're losing. David Attenborough has put out a whole bunch of beautiful docs. There's one that I really loved that was called, I think, the year the Earth stopped, or something like that. It came out, it was following from March 2020, when the pandemic hit, to March 2021, and how all these places that had kind of gone quiet because people had stopped tourism and the pandemic had slowed us down, all these animals that had made a bounce back. Nature was sort of recovering when we retreated, and that's a beautiful doc that I really enjoyed. I think it's on Apple TV, but I can't remember the exact name of it. But just look up David Attenborough about the pandemic. And then, of course, plant-based foods, which I've already mentioned quite a bit. That's 3 times a day. You can try and leave meat or dairy products off of your food. And then I would just say it's really about educating and communicating and having these conversations. Maybe become a volunteer and start talking to your local nonprofit, see how you can help them. Anywhere you go, there will be a wildlife rescue. So I'm a volunteer here in Charlotte. I use my electric car sort of as like a bird ambulance. So when there are birds that need to be transported that are either injured or orphaned, and need to be cared for, I just volunteer to go pick up the bird and get it to the facility where they can get their medical attention. There's a raptor center just down the street where they're saving hawks and eagles and owls. So you just have to look in your area and see who you can help. And those nonprofits are always struggling. They're always in need of donations. They're always in need of volunteers that want to help. I enjoy working with animals so much that, volunteering to help wildlife is a big thing that I love to do. But you can also do it for rescue animals. There's cats and dogs that need to be walked and need to get some attention while they're waiting for somebody to adopt them for their forever home. So you can always find somewhere to help if you just look around your community and see who needs it. There's always lots of people that need help.
That's great advice for the kids, to start looking around just your local area. I love that. And volunteering, you guys all need volunteer hours as high school students. So that's the best way that you can go use that time. I'm going to jump in on that same question. So one of my favorite pieces of Racing Extinction is the message of hope at the end, that it's just that one thing that you can do. That's the biggest takeaway that I ever had with my students in the classroom, was just, you can all make a difference if you just pick one thing. So with that being said, you're living that quote, "Be the change you want to see in the world," which is my favorite quote because it's true. Everybody can do one thing. So what are some easy things that students and teachers can do to really start getting that conversation going?
I mean, one of my favorite ways of educating people is watching films and sharing films. I am a big documentary film junkie. I love watching documentaries. I love feeling like I'm learning something. And it's such a passive way to learn, right? You just sit down, you hit play, and then you're kind of bombarded with and absorbing all this information. it's a very passive form of learning information. And that's why I got involved with filmmaking. That's why I retired from racing in 2019 to focus on filmmaking, because I think that is such a big way of getting people's attention. And in that 90 minutes, you know, it's one of the few times I feel like where people will turn off their phones, or at least silence their phones, and really, you know, have 100% attention on the screen, instead of scrolling through a million TikToks and scrolling through and liking all these different Instagrams or tweets. It's such a short form, I feel like, social media of people's attention. They have your attention for a few seconds and then they're on to the next thing. So filmmaking is one of the few ways where I feel like we get a decent chunk of somebody's time. And in that 90 minutes, you know, you can change their minds and make them care about a lot of things. And I think one of the things that Louis is so brilliant at with his filmmaking is making you feel emotions. So, you know, I think a lot of times when we're trying to get people to wake up about climate change or loss of species, we're using numbers, we're using PDFs, we're using graphs, and math kind of makes people's eyes glaze over. It's not a great way to inspire people to change their behavior. So I think what Louis does is so brilliant, where he really makes you look that animal in the eye. He has you have a personal experience maybe with one animal of a species, rather than just talking about, look how many species we're losing. No, instead you're getting to meet that frog. That's the last frog of his species, that when he blinked off the planet, his whole species was gone forever. And those are the kinds of things, when you can touch someone's heart and you can make them feel emotional about what we are losing, that is a life, that is an animal that will never walk this earth again, that was walking this earth when I arrived, and now it's gone and it'll never be back. Those are the kinds of things that inspire people. So for me, documentary filmmaking, when people are really good at making those films, I think that's one of the simplest ways to inspire people to change. And that's what changed me. You know, the first one was An Inconvenient Truth. And I always like to say, when I saw The Cove in 2010, it took my activism from third gear to fourth gear. And, you know, I've never stopped since. And so I really have to credit, you know, those films with helping inspire me to become an activist day in and day out. So I think that's one of the easiest ways. Find a film that you love, and whatever it is, you know, that you have passion for. It doesn't have to be the same things that I'm talking about today. You'll find something that you're passionate for. And if you nurture it and you really care about it, you can use that skill to help make the world a better place. And there's so many causes that need help these days. In a way, it's, you know, it's a great time to be alive, because there are so many problems that need fixing, and, you know, pick one and help make it better.
That's a great message to share with everyone. Probably a good one to end this on. I think that's all the questions. Yep, I think that's all the questions that have come in, and I think it's been a really great conversation. So I want to thank you, Leilani, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and you know, you have such a big audience with all the activism that you do. Hopefully, we brought in some new viewers to Headwaters Science Institute. So for everybody out there that's new to us, we hope you'll take a minute to go over and check out our website, see what we're all about, and it would be great if everybody shared this chat with your audiences as well, just to get it out there. That's such a great message on Earth Day for everyone to share. So yeah, Jen, did you have anything else to add?
I just wanted to say Happy Earth Day.
Yeah, it's going to jump off of that as well. You know, Earth Day is the perfect day to start that conversation to inspire change. I know for me, Racing Extinction has had a very special place in my heart as an educator. I think that it does inspire students to want to help and to know that there is hope for their futures. So today is the perfect day. Share this Q&A. You can always email us at info@headwaterscienceinstitute.org, or you can email myself, Jen, at headwaterscienceinstitute.org. Ask us questions. We do have a lot of programs available that your students can directly be involved with. We have a research experience program starting this summer where your students can do their own research project to try and inspire that change. We just had a student studying spider monkeys in the rainforest and looking at projected climate change and the impact it has on them. And he lives here in the United States. So the world is open for you to be that change and inspire others. So happy Earth Day, everybody. And thank you so much for joining us. Leilani, I appreciate you very much for taking the time to meet with us today. You definitely have inspired me, who's watched a lot of documentaries, like you said. So I thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.